What's up, everybody? You're listening to Racially Speaking. Welcome back. As always, I'm David Phipps, your host. And look, I just decided to front load everything and kind of get all the businessy stuff out of the way here at the beginning, and then we'll get into our conversation. First, if you haven't already, please consider joining our Patreon. Look, I've said this a bunch of times if you've been listening, but I'll keep saying it because I really believe in what we're doing. Look, please join our Patreon. You can join for as little as $1, $3, or $5 or more dollars a month. And all of that money right now is currently going towards helping us provide scholarships for first-generation BIPOC college students to purchase their textbooks each semester. And we are on our way for, in the fall, being able to provide at least 2 students, each one $100 scholarship towards purchasing their textbooks. So I'm really excited about that. Me and John Mark are really excited that we took that on as kind of our first initiative to do, to kind of get behind as a podcast and as a community as we grow the community. Also, please consider joining that. But also, please subscribe if you haven't already to the podcast on Spotify and or Apple Podcast or wherever else, Google, you get your podcast. 5-star review it. Write us a review. It takes, just a couple of seconds. I know that I do that for the podcasts I listen to. Please consider doing that. It might seem like it doesn't make a big difference, but in actuality, it really does. It helps it be easier to be found by others. And as you can imagine, helps us go up whatever charts there are. And we obviously want people to be listening. So please consider doing one, some, or all of those things. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And of course, secondly, I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this episode. I had the pleasure of being joined by one of my good friends of what I think we established was like 15 years, Brittany Osborne. My wife Caitlin and I went to college with Brittany. We've known her for, 15 years. She was one of Caitlin's bridesmaids, and we've just been really good friends through many different seasons. And have continued to, Brittany, as she'll explain, has been in and out, but we currently live in Radford together still and live a lot of life with each other. So I was really thankful to have her on to share a lot of her personal story. I actually learned a lot about her that I didn't know before in this interview. Hear her heart for allyship, for, of course, racial justice, for justice in general, her faith, her upbringing, some personal conversations that help shape her activism right now. And then I just learned so much about her role as a foster parent. So I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this. So let's just jump right in. Without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this conversation with Brittany Osborne.
Life in 3 dimensions got me bent and got me twisting. I know I done said a lot, but I should probably stop pretending. I don't really hold the key and I can't really push a button. I just step up to the mic and try my very best to bust it, but I ran out of breath. It's tight in my chest, my feet just might fail. I can't stand the pressure.
All right, Brittany, welcome to the podcast. I have already recorded an epic intro for you. Just rest assured, it's top notch that the listeners have already listened to. But as we jump in here, go ahead and I like that I pre-recorded an intro because now I'm going to ask you, introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners, and that'd be hilarious if it just matched up with everything I said. But look, I don't know. Who are you? What do you do? How far do we go back? Take that for what you will.
All right. So my name is Brittany. I grew up in southwestern Virginia, so not too far from Radford, a little over an hour away. Came to university, actually first at Virginia Tech, but ended up at Radford, so go Highlanders. That's where I met you and Caitlin. I think it was spring semester of 2009. So
I think it's 2008, which...
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't meet you I was coming to Radford while I was a Virginia Tech student.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah, I started at Radford in 2009. Anyway, okay. We met in 2008.
We're getting old.
We are getting old. My knees are, telling me that. I went to Radford, got my Bachelor of Science in nursing. I've worked a variety of different jobs.
That's true, but even just nursing, have you done like every form of nursing pretty much? It seems
I've
like
done a lot. Yeah. Never labor and delivery, which I felt like
that is ironic.
is what I was destined for in the
Right.
beginning. But yeah, a little bit of everything, including some travel nursing. So I've mostly been in Radford since then, but spent some time in Richmond, Virginia, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Charleston, West Virginia. So now I'm an RN sports medicine case manager, and I specifically am involved in coordinating care for collegiate athletes. So that's my day job at the moment.
Nice.
My primary role, and it has been since 2020, is foster mom. And so I currently have 2 foster placements. One is headed toward adoption, my 14-year-old daughter. And then I also have an 8-year-old foster daughter.
Yes. Lovely, lovely. I almost said little girls, but lovely girls.
Yes.
Love both of them.
Yes. Big energy in a good way.
That's awesome. I'm gonna ask you a lot more about that. Can we refer to them at all with just their initial?
Yeah, we can
no?
say
Okay.
K, who is 14, and M, who is 8.
Perfect.
Yeah.
K, that's amazing. I think I knew that, but to confirm that is headed towards the adoption route is awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very
that's
excited.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And love little M. She's great. She's great as well. Awesome. That was great. I think you hit everything that I would have said. But yeah, 15-ish years now we've known each other.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's wild. I was thinking about that recently when you all posted your anniversary.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I've seen them live so much. I mean, we've seen each other live so much life.
Definitely. In our wedding, obviously.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of stuff together. Let's jump in. Because of that, we could obviously go down so many rabbit trails, but try and stay on point, which I'm trying to get better at. Nature of the podcast, obviously, I've had you on, and for obvious reasons, I consider you, one of my very good friends, one of Kayla and I's, very best friends for years now. Look, you've been in these racial justice conversations with me for a long time now, and just look, what motivated you originally? I mean, I know the answer to some of this, but I'd love for you to share with the listeners. What motivated you originally, would you say, to enter into these conversations consistently, and what continues to motivate you now to keep having them? So, like, for listeners, like, what I mean is, like, not just why did you end up having one random conversation and you kind of come back to them. Like, I know this on a personal level, this is something that is in your life, something you regularly do. And I know you're not fishing for compliments, but that's coming from me. So, what motivated you originally? What kind of keeps you going?
I think my initial motivation would have been my relationships with people. So I grew up, I am an older sister by 4 years. I have a biracial younger brother. And as I mentioned, we grew up in a small town in southwestern Virginia. So I would say from a young age, I was aware that people were treated differently based on the color of their skin. I remember my little brother coming home like upset because kids were calling him an Oreo on the bus. And
he's half black, right?
Yeah.
Half black.
Yes.
Yeah.
But often gets mistaken for Hispanic or Latino. And so, and then also coming to college, I would say the relationships I formed and my friends of color, hearing their stories and their lived experiences and recognizing that there is very much still discrimination and racism, and caring deeply for those people and caring about the things that they're experiencing was, I would say, my initial motivation.
Yeah.
What has kept me motivated is honestly just the more I know God, the more I'm convinced that as a believer and a follower of Jesus, I need to be motivated. The foundation, Scripture says righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. And so if that's what he's about, then that's also what I need to be about in professing him.
Preaching. All right. going back to what you said with some of your, your lived experiences, maybe there are some, but I'm not even, of course I said we've known each other for a really long time. All things considered, would even consider myself kind of late-ish, even in our relationship, on being outspoken about this. So I'm not even lumping myself in with that. Was there any one or two, I don't know, do you have anything more specific about, like a specific conversation or instance that you had with somebody that was like a turning point, quote unquote, of like, oh, this is like a serious thing. This isn't just something that my black friends are making up or that I see like as a stereotype in I don't know, the headlines or something.
Yes, definitely. So even though I think I had an awareness for a long time, I don't necessarily know that I was like outspoken or like action oriented. Like I could recognize it, but I didn't really know what to do. Then around 2017, I had a really pivotal conversation with one of our mutual friends who is a biracial woman, half black. And we were, the events that happened in Charlottesville is what sparked the conversation. But it also got very personal, and she was being vulnerable about how it was hard growing up in this area as a biracial woman, and people saying things like, well, I just see you as white. And I said something pretty foolish in that conversation. I think at the time I was just unaware of the implications of what I was saying, but I said, I don't see color. And I think I was operating from the viewpoint of, when I talk about my brother who is biracial, I don't say this is my biracial half brother. I say this is my brother.
Right.
Then she reframed it for me and also helped me to understand that, in saying that, it comes across as like, well, you don't see all of me if you're not seeing my color. So that was a pivotal conversation that really was a reckoning for me to think through, what other things do I say or think that are hurtful and maybe like microaggressions that are offensive to people that I care about, because obviously I don't want to hurt the people I love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you explained the part with where you're coming from, with how you would describe or would not describe your biracial brother, because I think that is good to name and to describe, because, I mean, is it fair would you say that at that point, years ago at that time, you would consider yourself like one of those people that would say like, I'm obviously, like, I'm not a racist, like, racism equal like bad. I'm not a racist, whether it's because you have a biracial brother or not. But then through these conversations with, our mutual friends, and, you mentioned others, that you started to realize that's not good enough, in a sense of like, oh, but that's not necessarily like as far as it needs to go.
For sure. Yeah. Just because I didn't mean it to be offensive doesn't mean that it wasn't offensive. And so.
Yeah. All right. Let me keep moving a little bit. So let's move in a little farther, but you kind of even touched on it. I want to get kind of these first few questions are kind of more foundational as we head into some of the meat of this, but can you kind of briefly describe, this is reaching back a little bit, but what life was like for you during 2016, 2020-ish, Charlottesville, I think it was 2017. What it was like for you navigating like the increasingly polarized culture as a white Christian woman, and is there anything that specifically informs how you live now, like based around that time? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
I would say the simplified answer is it was a time of questioning for me. I would have been between the ages of like 26 to 30, so I was just kind of coming into my own, and also, though, felt really unsure of most things that I had previously felt like I could like nail down and be confident in, both in life in general, also in my faith. I would say during that time there were very few things that I felt sure of. I knew I believed the gospel. I've never doubted that. And then I also knew that I trusted in the sovereignty of God to lead and direct me. But otherwise, I felt like, man, I don't know anything about anything.
Can you give anything specific?
I can, yeah. So I would say that around 2016, I started to recognize that some of what I had been taught wasn't true of what I was reading and studying for my own. That I'd kind of been shaped through a very specific lens theologically. And then also, like, reckoning with later, I didn't even realize this then necessarily, or I couldn't pinpoint it anyways, that a lot of the theology that I was immersed in has a history of perpetuating racism. So, you know, that was kind of unnerving because I was like, man, this is what I've studied and this is what I feel like has shaped me. And then I'm reading about specifically the lives of some of the theologians that I was heavily immersed in and recognizing, like, they missed the mark big time in some really significant ways related to racism, and specifically slavery. So, yeah, I felt like that was an undoing of some of the theological stuff that I had previously felt pretty confident in. Also in life, I had so many different lived experiences between 2016 and 2020.
You did.
I was all over the place. A
woman of many hats.
Yeah, for sure.
Over the years.
In many places, both stateside and internationally. So some of the things that happened, I went overseas, and I think this was in... Ooh, I'm having a hard time now with the timeline. It was in that range of years.
Well, you've been to, let me see if I remember. You've been to Greece?
Yes.
Tanzania? Was there something else?
Well, I went to Ireland and England, but that was more for fun.
So Tanzania was way
earlier,
back when?
2012.
Right,
as soon as I graduated college.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was really eye-opening and life-altering. Again, at 22, I didn't really know what to do with a lot of that stuff that I was realizing. But, 2016, I think, is when I went to Greece. I could be wrong about that. But so I went over there with another church that we were partnering with to do refugee relief work to Syrian refugees. I flew into Istanbul, Turkey. We then we took another flight into Thessaloniki. I got to stay in an incredibly hospitable setting to be on a short-term missions trip. Nice. Ate really, really good food. We were hosted by a ton of different families at this Greek church, and it was an incredible experience on many fronts. One of the things that trip showed me is that I did have some fear about interacting with Muslim people specifically. And I didn't even recognize that initially. I was like, am I worried about going into the refugee camps and sharing the gospel? Like, and it wasn't about my faith. Like, that wasn't what I felt nervous about. I recognized that I was more worried about interacting with Muslim people. Yeah. And I had to think on that of why, because I have never personally had any negative or hateful interactions with Muslim people. I actually grew up with a lot of friends who were practicing Islam and Muslim. And so I recognized then that, little 11-year-old Brittany, around the time of the terrorist attacks in 9/11, really had taken in all of that, like, hateful rhetoric that was put on a whole people group. Yeah. And that took some time for me to recognize that. But
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can remember, confession time. 9/11, I was, I think, 7th grade. Obviously, like everyone remembers where we were when we heard the announcement or found out whatever. I was, in my Mrs. Green's 11th grade homeroom classroom, and I didn't even know what the World Trade Center was.
Right.
I just know that planes hit it, and I was like, the heck is the World Trade Center? Obviously, it took a long time before I realized the magnitude of what had happened. But yeah, I mean, I remember just not immediately, but from that experience as a young kid, hearing all the patriotic American way of thinking just surrounding me. And I went to I'm not going to blame this solely on this, but, I went to a conservative, predominantly white Christian school. It's also, the culture I grew up in, really. So I'll say that as well. But overall, just the patriotic rhetoric that just sprung about because of all that. Many people understand this, but I remember specifically being at an airport, however long after it was, and, seeing Muslim people, around or getting on a plane. I specifically remember, of course, a Muslim family in the waiting area, being essentially searched, like had to take everything off, like all shoes, everything. And I remember being really happy about it, being like, whew, like, thank God they're being, searched. Like, I was like, I couldn't, and I was a little kid. I was like, I couldn't get around. Like, I legitimately was like, I hope they get searched and that anyone that looks like them gets searched because I don't want them on, my plane. Fast forward, I don't remember how long it took me to see how wrong that way of thinking was, but it wasn't because people taught it to me. Like, I had to learn that
Right.
moving forward years and years later. So yeah, I mean, you bringing that up just made me remember that of like, gosh, like, we got, kids we're pouring into. So like, it really is that important at, even a young age. Like, you pick up on stuff like that. Like, I don't remember specifically someone sitting me down and being like, hey, look, 9/11, all Muslim people are bad.
Right.
It was stuff I picked up on intuitively of like, oh, yeah, we need to be in fear of these types of people. Like, look what happened. It's everywhere. It's on TV. Like, this is what they do, all of them.
Yeah.
And just how, egregiously wrong that is.
Even in
overall.
2016, when I came back into the country, anyone coming, there's still like a way that they're vetted in the airport that's different than other people.
So 15 years later?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've not been to an airport in a long time, but
me neither, unfortunately.
right. Sorry, I interrupted you. I don't know if you remember where you were.
Well, I got into 2016 Greece, so not very far.
Okay, yeah, no, keep it rolling.
Well, and then that conversation I talked about earlier in 2017 around the events in Charlottesville with my friend, good friend, like really grateful that she was gracious toward me and like cared enough about me to not shut down and to explain like, well, this is actually how that comes off.
Yeah.
2018 to 2019 is when I was doing travel nursing, I think, and lived in different contexts than what I was used to. So being in a city like Richmond, much more culturally diverse in a good way. And also you can kind of see more of the discrepancy in the city. And homelessness was something that I wasn't accustomed to, that I saw way more of there.
Sure.
So, yeah, different lived experiences. Then 2020 comes, and that was really just a pivotal time for me. I became a foster mom February 2020. I had a teenage girl at the time and her 13-month-old daughter. So I was a grandma at 29, right before I turned 30.
Yeah.
And then I start seeing all the stuff in the news. First, George Floyd was the main thing, but then other stuff comes out, like that had happened earlier on with Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. And I couldn't not say things at that point. So also hard time because we're socially isolated from people and you're mostly seeing, stuff on social media or through a screen one way or another. Yeah. You're not really having like face-to-face interactions and conversations as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at that point, I recognized that like I can't be apathetic. And I don't know that I was apathetic necessarily. I think I was just worried that I would say the wrong thing. And so that kind of kept me quieter.
Before or like before 2020 or?
I would say before 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was it? I'm going to make you unpack it a little bit because I think the majority of well-meaning people would share so far what you've said, a similar narrative of what you've said.
Yes.
So it's not sounding super unique yet because, I'm just be honest, we're 2023 and it's not like that now.
Sure.
I'll put it delicately.
Yeah.
These initiatives and all these things have lost steam and people have, returned to life as normal pre-2020. Not everybody, but what I'm getting at is, so what can you, maybe I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but can you pinpoint what it was that made you, like I said, my question was like, motivated you originally, but then keeps you, it's led you to action in a sense of this is your life now. It's part of your life. As your job is, as your relationships are, it's not just, well, if I got some spare time, I'll attend a diversity meeting,
right,
or read a book on vacation or something. It's like, no, this is something I'd say you sacrifice your time doing and even orienting yourself towards of how you spend your time, which we'll get to a little more in a second. But I don't know. I love hearing people's specific things because I know it's easy to be like, oh, 2020, I learned this and now things are different. But it's like, okay, but like how's different and what really made you see like, I can't go back?
Yeah, I think just a greater knowledge of who God is ultimately is what compels me. And like as his follower, scripture makes it clear like he's about every tribe, every tongue, every nation. And I was looking around though at the responses of other like-minded Christians and not, I want to say this delicately because again, I'm still like learning and figuring it out too.
Sure.
But I felt like there was a lack of willingness to take action. Like there was a lot of conversation around it. And there was a lot of, we were at similar discussions on racial injustice.
Yeah.
And we were in downtown Radford walking to bring awareness to like the atrocity of what happened to George Floyd. But I didn't see that in the church as a whole, and that was concerning to me. If anything, I think that's when I recognized like, wow, the church is actually a lot more divisive than I was aware of prior to this, not just politically, but also in regards to like the awareness of the extent of discrimination and racism that's still very much alive and
I think
impacting people.
And for listeners to, be completely honest, Brittany, I think we have similar perspectives of what was going on during that time, similar experiences as well. But we've never had this conversation, actually. We've never had this, until right now, honestly, about the similarities. We could assume some things, but I think like a lot of people, I went into a little bit of a cocoon during that time. Like, cocoon might sound too relaxing, but a hole.
Yeah.
During all that time, for similar reasons, like you're saying, similar sentiments of just my observations were all of this stuff is happening, George Floyd was the catalyst, but Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, shortly after Jacob Blake, we're in the middle of COVID.
Right.
Racial issues are at the forefront. Trump is still president. Like all this stuff is coming out of headway. And kind of like what you said, for me, it was, I'm out on Christianity. I'm out on following God. I'm out on church. But it was very much, whether it was because of social media or not, part of it was because it was during COVID, but it was the collective, like your words, church as a whole and Christians as a whole. It was the collective disparity between why are collectively in large proportions, the church and Christians erring on the side of complicity or pushback on what's going on, or taking the side of, I thought, wrongdoers, or, I know it's a buzzword, but like the oppressive side versus the side of the marginalized or the, oppressed or the victims. And that's not to say, and I say that painting with some broad strokes, because that's not to say, like you said, I didn't feel like I knew everything, but I also didn't, I didn't feel like I knew everything, but I didn't feel like I had to know everything at that point.
Yeah.
But what I did know is, look, I've been in church, most of my life. At a time like now, this feels wrong. And I need, it was a crisis. I was like, why is, at a time like now, isn't this what we've been preparing for, what I've been preparing for as a Christian, as a person of color, of at the time right now, I should feel the opposite. And I feel on a limb, and so do my friends who are people of color in the church. We all were just I couldn't handle the deer in the headlights from people who I thought would be in it
right
with me, or with others who, were hurting. And I couldn't handle that. That's how I kind of describe it to people. I couldn't handle the deer in the headlights, false calls for unity and lament with no action.
Right.
Again, it wasn't a fun place, and still is not a fun place to be in, to consistently be I didn't want to be on a high horse and judge people, but for me, that was my moment of or series of moments where I was just I can't go back to being okay with waiting and waiting and waiting. So I share, similar sentiments, I think of what you're saying, that have led, I think both of us to this being part of our life, just infinitely, because, like you said, feel like this is the right thing to do.
And I think the bigger thing that was disheartening in all those conversations is, especially the ones that we set in together, I don't feel like the expectation was for people to come having all the answers. But instead of there being a curiosity and a desire for understanding, it was more a defensiveness. And that was the thing that I couldn't really
it's a straw that
anymore.
Broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Is that the saying? Yeah. Absolutely. So. Yeah. There was just no time at that point anymore. There was no time to, it stinks, but there was no more time to be charitable and to spend time explaining stuff to people that didn't really want to know why it was important.
Right.
They just wanted to know how to fix it, and how to not have to have these conversations anymore.
Yeah.
And another thing I realized, I was I have to spend time with people. I can't waste time on conversations like that when people are dying, when there's clear things. Like I said, we don't know everything, but when there's clear things that can be done, and there's so many people that do want to know what to do.
Right.
I can't spend time doing that anymore. Which goes back to the deer in the headlights thing. It's the whole, because then, obviously you'll have pushback. Some, at least I did, on well, stick it out a little longer. Isn't that unchristian of you to, leave those people out on the streets? And to me, I see that point, but I also see the point of, what about, scripture that tells us to be faithful to preach the gospel and to share, but ultimately it's not up to us, right? And then I can't remember, I should have this, but the verses, about, I'm not big on trying to take anything out of context, but I think the verses also say really clearly about sharing the gospel, and then if people aren't going to listen,
right,
wipe off the dust from your feet, shake the dust off your feet, and move on to the next. And so that's kind of the mentality. I was I can't be afraid. People can't be afraid to do that. It stinks, but it's it was a turning point for sure. 2020. But I appreciate you sharing what that was like during that time. I'm sure we'll refer back to it some more. All right, let me keep moving a little bit. You've already mentioned this plenty, but you felt called recently is over the last few years to get involved with the foster care system. What led you to that? And I didn't even put together that it was like your first placement was 2020. So
Yeah.
Holy cow, on the nose.
Yes.
So why'd you decide to get into that?
I would say that I've always had a heart and like a desire to care for children who are oppressed specifically. So when I went to Tanzania in 2012, that was to do work at a medical clinic, but also I lived on a compound with 99, well, 100, 99-ish, whatever, orphans. And not all of them were orphan in the true sense of like their biological parents were not around or present. But in that village specifically, there was a lack of resources in a lot of regards, one of which is like knowledge of birth control and things like that. And so families would often have more kids than they could physically care for. And also on this compound, there was a primary school. So it was an opportunity for their kids to like have shelter, food, education, training in different trades, things like that. So that's really what led me to Tanzania, is feeling a call to care for the orphan. And then I was actually asked to stay in Tanzania, but that experience opened my eyes to all the things. Like I would have to completely, and I was willing if it was what I knew God was calling me to, completely move my life and like learn a language, learn a culture. And I thought that made me think more about what is the need in the States? Like, do we have a similar need in a culture that I understand and a language that I speak? And the answer was yes, there is actually a huge need. We call it foster care. They call it orphan care. So, and I have friends. It's just ironic the amount of people God has brought to my life who are in different parts of the world, like Guatemala. I have a friend going to Peru who both have a heart for the orphan and are going to help kids specifically who transition out of foster care or orphan care without permanency, giving them a trade and mentoring them so that they can be successful.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Then I had a lot of friends here who were certified as foster parents and many who have adopted out of the foster care system. So there was a greater proximity to that in my like day-to-day life. Ultimately, the thing that led me to get certified for my first placement was I actually knew the family that previously was a foster home for my foster daughter who came to me in February of 2020. And I knew that she needed a different placement, but also with the desire for there still to be proximity to her first foster home and the community that she had been in. And so that's really what ended up leading me to do it as a single woman in my late 20s. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I knew all those facts about you in a vacuum, but I didn't even connect your experience in Tanzania to being led to get involved with foster care here in America, which is great because I feel like the unfortunate cliche about Christians, I guess like in the evangelical churches, we love to, the appeal is go save all the kids in Africa.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily, we don't care about those same types of issues in America. So I love that is the trajectory that you're calling for foster care. Went on. That's really cool. I've never, heard you explain it that way, which I should have asked you about that more, but I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. That was also, I would say in Tanzania, it was eye-opening to like the white savior complex of Americans. Like, I don't think I was very aware of that prior to going and being in a context where I'm the minority in that setting, but also being seen as like beautiful and smart just because my skin is light.
What'd you say? So was that your experience over there?
It was, yes. I forget
Okay.
the Swahili word for white.
Okay.
But when I would walk through the village, they would like draw attention like to me, and
Okay.
very much came with the mentality of like, you can help me, like, you know,
Because
like that
you're
was
white.
because I'm white. Yeah.
Okay.
When really I was just out of nursing school and hardly knew what I was doing. So
Yeah.
I knew enough to be, helpful,
Yeah, yeah.
but was not seasoned and didn't feel necessarily well equipped.
You weren't not helpful,
Right.
but not because you're not helpful because you're white.
Right.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, you touched on it, but how would you say your perspective on what foster care was like? How has that changed at all from your first expectations of it, I guess? I mean, you touched on it. You brought up the white savior complex.
Mm-hmm.
I've asked a couple of people about that on here before, but so we don't necessarily have to unpack that a ton. But, right now, it's okay. Like your foster children are white.
Right. Yeah, that's fine to say.
You obviously didn't, know who or like what race or anybody you would get, but there is a racial element to the foster care system, from my loose understanding.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair.
How is that? I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to ask with this question at this point, but bringing up racial elements or not, like, what has your perspective on the system as a whole, even aside from your personal experience? How has your understanding of it as a whole changed from what you knew coming in?
I didn't recognize how it was gonna intersect with every other broken system that we have statistically. I knew it would be messy, and I knew it would be hard, but it's been an extra level of messy and hard.
That was an amazing answer to a 2-wordy question.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So what specifically? So what might I not know? Or I'm speaking for our listeners, but I'm speaking for myself really. Like what, I'm trying to think of an assumption maybe I would have had coming in. But what is an example of something intersected with that you're like, whoa, how does this even come up?
Mm-hmm. So I'll start by talking about the racial component. Okay. Nationwide, there's an overrepresentation of Black youth in the system. So I think I wrote down some statistics. So the total percentage of Black children represented nationwide is 14%. The total number of Black children in care is 23%, compared to nationwide 50% of the child population is white, but there's a 44% representation of that in foster care.
Okay.
So when you do it's not balanced.
Yeah.
And typically Black children spend a longer amount of time in care. And the longer kids spend in care, the poorer outcome for the rest of the trajectory of their lives. Another thing that, while we're talking statistics, I'll just put them all out there.
Yeah, no, these are great.
So when kids age out of foster care, specifically without permanency in a forever family or feeling like they belong to a family, 28% instantly become homeless. Half will become substance abusers. 70% will become pregnant before the age of 21.
Sorry, what was the beginning of this stat? Who is this?
Children who age out of foster care without permanency and belonging.
Okay.
So 70% will become pregnant before the age of 21. Less than 3% will earn a college degree. 20% will be incarcerated by the age of 21. And females are 80% more likely to be sex trafficked if they've spent time in the foster care system.
Wow. So
when you look at those statistics and then you recognize, statistically there's an overrepresentation of Black youth in care, they are a higher majority of those statistics as well.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to get into this, but I specifically think when I was reading Jordan Neely's story. Those statistics like really impacted the way I
didn't read it. I didn't
his life.
Delve into that part of it very much.
Yeah.
So yeah, go for it.
So I think you mentioned his mom was murdered. His mom was actually murdered by his father in 2007. Yeah. So he comes out of that with like really severe PTSD, of course. He is housed with his grandparents for a few years, but then his behaviors and things kind of become unsafe, and he enters into foster care probably like 2010, 2011 in New York City. I don't know exactly when he exited the system. Actually, I think he aged out of the system. I read that in an article.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think the quote was like he was given a Metro card and basically told, good luck. So he has all of these mental health things, understandably so, that were never addressed when he was in care. And they interviewed a CASA, which is a court-appointed state advocate, and she pretty much said, like, he fell through the cracks. He's the type of kid that I could have helped, basically. Okay. So just thinking through, like, his lived experience and his time as a kid in care and the way that he didn't get the resources he needed. Another statistic is that up to 80% of children in foster care have significant mental health issues compared with the 18 to 22% of the general population. So that's a pretty significant amount. There's roughly 400,000 kids in foster care at any given time in the States. And I think 100,000 of those are typically like headed toward adoption, but they're also older teenagers, which don't typically get adopted. And I don't know the numbers, but I would be willing to bet that there's also an overrepresentation of kids of color. Can you
say the statistics you first said about to break down the overrepresentation?
Yes, it's a bit confusing if you're not looking at it. Yeah. So I'm
gonna try and follow it better this time.
I'm just gonna read it instead of trying to paraphrase it.
That's okay.
This is also based on a nationwide study in 2018. Okay. So, nationwide, Black youth are overrepresented in foster care. In 2018, Black children represented 14% of the total child population, but 23% of all kids in care.
Yes, okay.
In comparison, white youth represent 50% of the nation's child population and 44% of its foster care population.
Right, so similar to how you can break down stats about when people want to bring up crime and stuff of percentages.
Yeah.
Explain that. Not the exact same way, but same kind of sentiment. Okay. There was something I was going to have you do as well. Oh, okay. So sticking on foster care. So mental health has been brought up.
Right.
Homelessness.
Incarceration.
Race, incarceration, all
drug
these things.
Abuse, yeah.
Drug abuse. I'm sure domestic abuse, all that kind of stuff.
Unplanned pregnancies, specifically in 21 and younger. So
sex trafficking, I know after they age out. So, all right. Well, even talking about the things you brought up with Jordan Neely, I think it's helpful to ask this. So, to be fair, what is there to be done about somebody who is aged out or getting ready to age out once they've already slipped through the cracks, 15 through 17? Obviously they needed better. There needs to be way better mental health care. Sure. But then you gave, the terrible example of here's a Metro card, see ya, buddy. What, you know what I mean? What can be done for a 17-year-old or 18-year-old? I guess 17-year-old. Once they've fallen through the cracks. You know what I mean? Because I would say some people are there's too much to fix. We can't do anything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know I'm having you answer a question that probably can't be answered, but.
Well, when it comes to the reason why the statistics are significant for kids who age out without permanency and belonging is because of how important attachment is. And so if they don't have someone, and honestly, it takes one person, which I think is why that CASA worker said what she did of like, I could have helped him if I had known him. It takes one person that they know is in their corner and that isn't going to quit on them.
Yeah.
To be that support, to help them navigate getting an apartment, getting a job, going to therapy, like processing through the things that they've lived through in their lives to be healthy and to like break generational patterns.
Yeah.
It goes back way further than just that one kid, you know?
Yeah.
It's usually foster care is usually a generational thing. The number one indicator of kids coming into care is if their mother spent time in foster care. So it's a cycle that continues to repeat itself, as are so many of those other things that I mentioned statistically.
Yeah.
That are hard to break out of if you don't have support. And if obviously we need to do better from like a government and state level. But also the church needs to do better.
Okay, let's go there for a second, because I was going to ask you that. I mean, am I just letting this go over my head? Like, are you essentially tiptoeing around, calling us all out and saying like,
sort of,
look,
yeah.
Okay, this is just, wait, what am I doing? You post a lot.
Yeah.
You guys should follow Brittany. She posts a lot about this stuff. You posted a stat. You probably don't have it on the top of your head. Maybe you do, but a stat about how much. It was a poll, I think. It was a long time ago about the amount of Christians say that they like care about foster care, think it's a priority, but then the percentage of people that actually do it, and I was like, it was staggering to me because I read that stat and I was like, oh my gosh, the disparity is. And I've read so many stats like that are in the racial justice space. It'd be absolutely hypocritical of me to not, really take that to heart and think about it. So, like, do you remember even ballpark what that stat was?
I do, actually, specifically.
Okay.
77% of Christians would profess that, like, in following Jesus, we need to care about foster youth in the system. 5% are actually opening their homes up and doing the day in, day out work. I will also say that I don't know that I would tell everyone to be certified to be a foster parent.
Okay.
However, there are many avenues to caring for kids and impacting the system as well that Christians can be involved in that don't include full-time, like, permanent foster care.
So would you both, let's say, so what are some of those? So you would say, is it fair to say getting certified and entering into this, being a foster parent is obviously not a lighthearted thing.
Right.
But you've also been pretty outspoken about it, not being a special person either, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, like,
where's
the sweet spot?
I cringe when people are like, you're so special. And I'm like, I'm willing. I'm not special. Sure. And I do feel like God very clearly called me to do this. Like, I can see that it's woven in my story way further back than what I recounted when you asked that first question. So, you don't have to be... There's so many misconceptions. Like, honestly, when I sat down to talk about getting certified, my first question was, I'm not married. Can I be a foster parent? Yeah. And they were like, absolutely, you can. We need single foster homes because sometimes kids don't thrive in a 2-parent home. Sometimes if they've experienced abuse, like, for example, if a kid has experienced sexual abuse at the hands of a man, they're going to do much better in a single mom home.
That's great, because that was one of my questions. Not to say, obviously, I think you're an amazing parent, but the cliche is like they need a stable, whatever, nuclear 2-parent household.
Yeah, and honestly, the church is what told me that more than anything else.
Okay.
And I think that there is value in that. I do think, like, that is the way God intends it to be, but we're far from the garden at this point. And like, I think God would much rather, and I know personally for me to commit doing this as a single mom than to wait for if and when I get married.
Yeah.
You know, like that just doesn't make sense. And no one also along the same line of thought, like outside of the church, no one who is a single biological parent asks like, can I be a parent? So, you know, it was just a complete skewed idea on in my head at that point.
Absolutely. What I mean, yeah. What an amazing I'm trying to think of the word, but like just story and example of, you know, how many opportunities or how many women in your situation like that don't make the, I don't know, the plunge is not the right word, the commitment or take the steps to move forward because of those ways of thinking. Yeah, that's, oh man. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I think I've thought a lot about what will the kids in my home lack not having a father, because I think having a father figure is incredibly important. I also think that God, regardless of if you're co-parenting, like if you're raising kids in a two-parent home or single parenting, God meets us in our lack all the time. And also, I think if the church is truly a representation of the eternal family that we are going to be, that lack gets met in other ways through other people as well too. Yeah.
Some even dots I'm connecting with even foster care and then racial justice, like, and it often does come back to the family. You know, over the years, I don't know if you've heard this, but I've heard a lot of like gaslighting and kind of commandeering certain narratives, like even the BLM movement. So I know there's certain things that have become problematic. Maybe some listeners maybe do, maybe don't know. We haven't really broken it down, but there is stuff out there about how some money was used with down the road with the founders, whatever. You can go look it up. Anyway, I'll put that out there. But the overall sentiment of Black Lives Matter, BLM, and then originally, like on the website, if you ever went to read the website of like what the organization was about, there was so much about family, and their whole initiative it's very family-like and caring about different. They essentially broke it down of like the family doesn't have to be this stereotypical two-parent household, you know, normative Christian, I guess, picture. It can be, and it named a ton of different things. Not a Christian organization.
Right.
People, you guys know that.
Yeah.
But on that note, I would hear so many Christians break that down and just be like, oh, that's terrible. Like they're coming after the nuclear family.
Yeah,
they're trying to destroy it. And it's like, no. Like I would just tell people that. I'd be like, okay, one, please understand it's not a Christian organization. Two, please just read. Like, did you actually read the website? Have you ever done that?
Right.
The answer was always no. So I'm just saying, like, go read through it. Like, I would try to gently tell people, I'm like, where do you see here that they are like attacking it versus trying to honestly elevate it and redeem it and work with, I love your words of far from the garden at this point. It's just like, Christians, we have to understand, like, we're living in the world and we're supposed to, you know, be Jesus's like body pursuing the marginalized, the oppressed, and like working redemption. Like he's working redemption through us, and that's how we're doing it. If all we do is look, oh, I'm being attacked, or my way of life or thinking is being attacked right off the bat, like we're never going to do anything. And so that's where I kind of went with what you're saying of, oh, sure, you know, obviously a single parent or single woman especially couldn't do foster care, which brings me back to like, when you had that conversation, did you legitimately not know if you were going to be like qualified? Like, actually? Not personally, but like that the system wouldn't let you?
I was kind of worried about that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, in my head, you know, I always go in with questions, but also I've had a pre-conversation with myself about how the conversation might go. And so I was like, surely not, but maybe they're going to tell me like, yeah, you know, you need to be a two-parent home to do this. So, yeah.
So interesting. Cause you know, you said you got a lot of that from church, but also, you know, I assume the foster care system isn't necessarily, I'm sure it's tied in some way, but isn't necessarily a Christian endeavor.
No. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. All right, man, this has been great. I got a few more if you're cool.
Yes.
How have you navigated the fostering and foster to adopt mentality? So I've heard, honestly, until just recently, like, okay, that foster to adopt thing isn't a thing, but then just recently, I don't remember who it was, or maybe I read it. Someone was talking about how, it is. Obviously, you mentioned heading towards adoption with one of yours, and then we know plenty of people that has been their story as well. But
Right.
shed some light. Is that ever an appropriate mentality to come into foster care with?
I would say no.
Okay.
Other people might disagree with me. The goal of foster care and honestly, I don't know if this is really happening, but they're trying to move away from the language of foster parent and
Really?
talk about it more as like a resource parent. So the goal of foster care is to give the biological family the time and the resources that they need to be
Able to care
for their children. Because even kids who are adopted from infancy, there is still a type of trauma that happens when you're removed from your biological family. Specifically, I would say mother at that point, because you just grew in her body and heard her voice and her heartbeat and everything for 9 months. And so the goal and the best case scenario for the kid is always to stay with their biological family. It is not, foster care is not meant to be like a fast track to adoption. The first and primary goal is always reunification. And then if that's not possible, and they even look outside the biological family at that point too for like kinship. Is there someone who's consistently been in the child's life who might not be a blood relative, but who they know and are familiar with and who's suitable to care for them? Then after those, if the biological family and a kinship placement isn't a possibility, then adoption is an option.
Okay.
But so many Christians specifically get the bad rep because they do go into foster care with the mindset of I'm going to adopt through the system. And sometimes it's seen as like plan B to growing a family, specifically if people have struggled with infertility.
I assume even plan C, because adoption is pretty expensive.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And that's the other thing about it too, is like when you adopt through the state, it is much less of a financial obligation. And so, there's a lot of things about it that are cringy when people are like foster to adopt, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There are kids who come into care and are immediately going to be headed toward adoption because of the circumstances that they're coming out of, but that's not the majority.
Right. And the nature of my question was more like, is it ever appropriate to have that coming in? Not, does it ever happen? Like, I understand they're for sure going to be, I some of my friends, that was their story. Like, just they ended up with, several kids from infancy even that were just like, I mean, we're almost definitely going to adopt them. That wasn't their mentality.
Right.
But that is what happened. But it sounds like, and this is consistent to what I have heard from our mutual people that we know, even of would be inappropriate to enter into that with that being your personal goal, correct? Of like, I'm going to adopt.
Right. I would say no to that. That should not be the goal. You should be in it to help. My goal in being a foster parent was to see reunification happen. That has not been my experience, but I was willing to advocate for the biological family to like get the resources that they need. That's the other thing that there's a huge discrepancy in the availability and the accessibility of resources to foster parents versus the biological family. So it's a lot easier for me to get access to education or training or even like financial support than it is for the biological family that's already operating at a deficit most of the time.
So why? Interesting. Why is that? My ears are perking up because that sounds like would be one of the more fixable things.
Right.
That's me kind of naively looking in. But like, why is that?
Again,
would you say?
Hotly debated.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. So some people don't see it as a lack of resources for the biological family. They see it as a lack of appropriate use of resources. So if
you said education, so like what?
Yeah.
How is that?
Well, parenting classes can be incredibly, like there can be a 6-month wait list just to get into a parenting class. But me being certified as a foster parent, like I would be expedited into something like that because I need that to maintain what I'm doing. And yeah, so a lot of times, like at least for the first year, typically the goal is reunification. But if 6 months of that is parents, biological parents, sitting on a wait list trying to just get into like one parenting course, then that's not really giving them access to what they need to be successful and to have their kids return home.
It reminds me of like the SAT prep courses, like a little bit. You know,
that was a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, what I mean, sorry, that was a weird thing to bring up. Like with education, so like with SAT, I'm a terrible test taker, so I'm like pretty biased and like hating tests. But I just remember taking those SAT prep courses, and stuff I've read about them made me feel better later in life because, you know, again, that was a long time ago. If you remember the SAT, it's not necessarily who knows all the information. Like those SAT prep courses, if you ever took one, like teach you how to take the test.
Right.
Versus what's on the test, you know what I mean? So it's like you're learning strategy. Those courses are expensive, like really expensive. And so what's happening is, you know, the more wealthy, obviously typically white people are paying to learn how to take the tests, getting better scores. So then it's just a circular thing. Their schools, they get into better colleges, their schools get better resources, and so on. So I don't know. It reminded me, that might be a stretch, but a little bit of the availability versus, now literally I feel like you're giving great examples of the system. I feel like we throw that term around a lot with these conversations, but that's literally like the system is set up to help the foster care parents who are supposed to be advocating for the birth parents, but literally the system is working against that being like actually what is going to happen like that. That's really helpful and a little disheartening to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Okay, just a couple more here. I guess you shed light on this a little bit, but what do you think most people most commonly misunderstand about foster care?
That the kids are, I think, especially with teenagers are the biggest age group that's misunderstood by and large. I've had teenagers in my home. You've interacted with them. They're pretty awesome kids.
Absolutely.
They're typically not perceived that way. They're seen as, you know, they have too much baggage. They've experienced too much trauma. And this little tiny baby that's cute and, you know, that's like more of the draw than work, like being in the throes of it with a teenager, which I will say it is hard work. Like I'm not making light of it. Yes. Lots of throws. There have been days where I'm like, this is going to take me out. I'm pretty sure. But also at the same time, I know how much value, like I know that it's worth it. I'm fine sacrificing whatever I need to sacrifice to help the kids in my home be successful and thrive and flourish. And so much of that does come from my identity as a follower of Jesus and what I have received. You know, grace, mercy. He's lavished so much on me that I'm not deserving of in some of my most unlovable moments. And so, and the hospitality, I think, of Christ is another thing that really compels me to continue to like keep my home open and hospitable, specifically to people and kids that might not be received other places.
Yeah.
So
This is great. This is all super helpful. All right, last thing, and I'll let you get out of here on this one, but what's one thing you'd want listeners to consider from what you've said? There's a lot of things I'd want them to consider as well as myself, but you only get one. Like what's,
man.
yeah.
I would say consider what role you can play.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you. So, what are some other things you mentioned? You don't have to be certified necessarily. Right. What are some other things?
So, there's different ways to be certified even. Okay. I'm certified to be a full-time permanent foster home placement.
Okay.
Permanent just means long-term. It doesn't mean that the goal won't eventually be adoption.
Right.
You can also be certified to be a respite home. Mm-hmm. There is a huge lack of respite available to...
Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So respite would be that you go through similar training as a full-time foster parent, like have the same education, same classes, same certification even, but you take placements on a short-term basis. So a lot of times they need somewhere for kids to go just so they're not sleeping on the floor of DSS overnight until they can find a permanent placement.
So even for like a day or a weekend or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of times it'll be a day or a weekend. Sometimes it is more than that because it's oftentimes hard to find a place to put them permanently. Yeah. It can also be in a situation like me. I utilize respite as a full-time foster parent when I need sometimes just when I need a break. Or if I am, traveling out of town and for whatever reason, it's not feasible for the girls to come with me.
Yeah.
Things like that. I can use respite care and kind of get a little breathing space for myself. Yeah. Which is super helpful as a single parent.
Yeah.
You can also be certified as a CASA, which I mentioned earlier, court-appointed special advocate. CASAs typically are not legally appointed or anything. You can request them like through the court, and it varies state to state. So I can't talk about this like broadly because it might be different in other places.
So Virginia.
Yeah, Virginia. CASA basically is just responsible for advocating for the kid. Like it's the child's advocate. Okay. And they aren't DSS, like it's not the caseworker. They aren't the guardian ad litem, which is the attorney that's like appointed to represent kids in care. They aren't any other legal realm of involvement other than they do go before the judge and say, this is what I've seen in the biological family. This is what I've seen in the child. This is what's going on in the foster home, and kind of give like an overarching big picture of what would be in the best interest of the child, considering all those things. Yeah. Mentors, that's like more informal. You don't have to be certified to be a mentor. Oh, okay. Though there are some programs that you could get like a certification through. Honestly, for my teenage girls, having other women mentor them has been pivotal. Mm-hmm. The more support kids have around them, the more likely they are to do well and even like be able to maintain those relationships past, whether they go whether they're reunified, whether they are adopted, or whether they age out of the system. Like having people that they know are there for them and that they can call up if they're in need.
That's great. How long? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I could continue.
No, that's great. How long? Just for people who are hopefully contemplating now, what does a certification take? Like for full-time or respite specifically? Yeah.
So to get certified as a foster parent, it can be as quick as like 3 months. It took me about 6 months. Okay. To get all the paperwork, do all the coursework, like classes. Also, I got certified during
COVID.
Well, Sort of, yeah.
Ish, yeah.
I didn't get certified. I became a foster parent like 2 weeks before the world shut down,
Okay.
as far as
Oh,
like
gosh.
receiving my first placement. But because I was getting certified to take a specific placement, they kind of expedited some of my stuff. So instead
Okay.
of waiting for a whole nother class, like a 6-week class to start,
Yeah.
I got more individual training.
Okay. Gotcha.
Also, just bringing meals, offering to like do a grocery run, or people have helped me like transport to and from appointments,
Yeah.
have offered to go to appointments for like, and so I could work usually is what I'm doing.
If more people that you know are certified for respite, are you able to pick who they go to?
Yeah, I'm not going to say that's true across the board, but they would listen to what I asked for my kids, or what my kids were asking for. Because if kids know, like already have a relationship with the family,
Right.
of course, that's going to feel a lot more comfortable than going to a stranger's home.
Right. So if you, like you mentioned, like need to go like are out of town, they
Yeah.
can't come. But for example, like they know a family really well, like they're not an option because they're not certified. So then they would have to go.
That's actually, that used to be the case.
Okay.
There was a federal law passed, I think it was in 2014. It's called the Normalcy Act.
Okay.
And under that gives foster parents the discretion of who so basically, like if you would trust your biological kid to go, like sometimes my girls go stay with my family. They're not certified or anything, but I would certainly let one of my biological children go stay with my aunt or my grandma or my mom. And so under the Normalcy Act, I have the discretion of saying this is a safe person that I trust to care for my kid. Also, before that, foster youth couldn't even go to like prom without someone certified.
Oh, really?
At the event. Yeah.
Wow.
So it also opens up all those avenues of, it's more, the goal prior to the Normalcy Act was safety, and of course that's still the goal. But they also recognize like how alienating it is.
It'd be horrible for high school
especially
students
teenagers.
and teenagers. Okay. So being certified for respite is even, so it may be even now with the Normalcy Act being passed, like just more helpful, so then you're available for maybe people you don't know.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's a lot of foster families that would need respite, and there's not a lot of respite.
So the family
certified
thing
homes.
that you mentioned isn't a loophole necessarily. It's like you could essentially leave them for a weekend with who you, to your discretion. Okay.
I could, yes. Now, that's not to say that sometimes I might have kids that require a higher level of care that I feel like need a certified, like trained respite home to be in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, thanks, Britt, for, honestly, learned a ton. I know our listeners, everyone listening have. Thanks for doing this. This was really helpful to kind of unpack. Yeah, I mean, foster care and hearing your personal experience. I mean, everyone knows let's listen to more than one episode. I'm really big with interconnectedness. Like you, I mean, hit the nail on the head with your story, your journey to entering into racial justice conversations, but then how it just informs your advocacy for, I mean, the marginalized overall, but your faith, family, vocation, which is all kind of the whatever pillars of kind of the podcast here, and then foster care. That was really, really, really helpful. I appreciate it so much. I know our listeners will. Seriously, you guys follow Brittany. You might hate that I'm saying that. I know you don't want to like say you're an influencer or anything.
I'm
but
not.
You post,
I'm not an influencer.
Okay, she's not. But you post a lot of helpful stuff, I'll say, and so it's helpful. I learned a lot. Like I read a lot of stuff you at least repost and stuff. So, okay. I won't. Overdo it because I know you don't like that. But all right, you guys, thank you so much for listening. Brittany, thank you as always. listeners, thank you for listening. As always, the music you're listening to is done by our friend Dylan Dent, and our artwork was done by Ashley Bush. And we'll see you guys next time.
The nightmare might scare you, no worse than reality. They hunt you by day, R.I.P. Ahmaud Arbery. Everybody got a time, but that's less than comforting. I hope I'm alive by the time they choose to comfort me. Mosquitoes in the vein, or leeches on my soul. This money on my mind is a fracture in my bones. You get crippled by continuing existence like a ghost. And they wonder why we drink, and they wonder why we smoke, and they wonder why we think that everything's a joke. I'm shocked that we can sleep, must be the thought of letting go.